So I consider myself pretty proficient when it comes to technology, but I pulled a real stunt on Sunday with Birds and the Bees, the third class. I was wearing a microphone to improve the audio, and I muted it in the middle of it, which I should have done. Then I forgot to unmute it. So the video recording is this long 15 minutes of silence that I didn't really figure was going to be good or helpful to anybody. So I'm going to redo the class, going to talk about a little bit about what I said in that class. Kind of go through my slides, same thing I did, show you the same videos I showed them. The slides, you can follow along up here as I'm talking through it all. So let's get into our content. First thing I should say, I'm not an expert. I joke that I'm a hack. I'm not an expert when it comes to adolescent development. I've read a little bit. I've studied it. I've been around adolescents a while. I'm not a clinically trained expert. So what I'm sharing today comes from my personal experience, what I've learned, what I've read, what I've experienced, but I do not purport to be an expert on adolescent development. Just want to make sure that that is out in the open and in the clear from the start. So let's talk about this. Two things we're going to talk about in this session. One is adolescent development as it relates to sexuality, and specifically pornography and its implications for sexual development and education. All right. So kind of two things. One, a big overarching outline of exactly what I'm trying to talk about. The other is going to be a specific threat, specific danger that I see within adolescent culture today. So let's talk a little bit about adolescent sexual development, and specifically, what is adolescence? Adolescence, simply put, is a period of transition between being a child and being an adult. Okay, you can nuance that definition a lot of ways. There's extended adolescence. You might have read about that. That's this idea that adolescence continues much later than it did. But very simply, it's the difference between being a child and adult, period of that transition. And specifically, today we're talking about junior and senior high, those teenage years, specifically what we're talking about. And we're going to look at it through three different aspects, okay? Of physical, emotional, and social development. Now, you could throw spiritual development in here as well, but spiritual development actually, I think, ties into social and emotional development. So I didn't break it out into its own category, okay? But let's talk about this. An adolescent is simply defined as somebody who in that period of transition, and the easiest way to define it is to talk about biological markers, all right? The biological marker for the onset of adolescence for a girl is the first time she receives her menstrual cycle. Very, very easy to mark, very easy to delineate. For boys, it is defined as their first ejaculation by whatever means that occurs, okay? Not as easy necessarily to nail down and define in the same way. Those are physical markers. There are prepubescent features. There's prepubescent development that happens before that. But simply put, because it's the easiest to actually nail down, those physical indicators are considered the first two signs of adolescent sexual development, okay? So an adolescent, junior, senior high student who has experienced either first ejaculate or their first menstrual cycle, where would you place them on the spectrum between being a child and adult? I'd put them right near the top. Simply put, they are capable of sexual reproduction, okay? That is the baseline definition for a physical adult as far as I'm approaching it in this framework. Do their bodies look the same as they will when they're an adult? No, but even adult bodies are constantly changing. I used to have a lot more hair than I do now, all right? So, but simply put, they are physical adults. What about emotional? Emotional, I don't put them quite as high. They're not quite adult-like. They're not quite capable of the emotional stability that we would expect from an adult. If you've lived with a teenager for any period of time, you know this, right? The emotional ups and downs and swings that you are expected for a junior high girl or junior high boy especially, we expect them to grow out of that. We expect eventually that wild emotionalism to fade, okay? But they are capable of making friendships that transcend geography. And that's kind of the marker of adolescence and into adulthood, all right? When you are young, you develop friendships basically based on proximity, whoever you are around the most. As you move into adulthood, you develop friendships based on affinity. Now, proximity always helps, right? It's much easier to become friends with somebody who are actually around, but simply put, you develop friendships based on affinity. An example of this is that when kids start out in elementary school, they're basically friends with their neighbors, right? They're friends with the kids who they play with the most. Their mom or dad's close friends, their kids tend to be friends with them, okay? These friendships change, though, specifically when they get into junior high and senior high. And this is why sometimes you'll find out that people who your kids were close friends with in elementary school, they have nothing in common with and don't hang out with at all when they get into middle school, okay? So we've got a physical adult, almost emotional adult, but a social child. They would be upset with me for saying this, but it's true. Even senior high kids aren't that much farther ahead socially than they were when they were 7 or 8 years old. They still rely on their parents for almost everything. Even college students, in a lot of ways, fit into this social category. They're a little higher up. They've got more independence. They can do more by themselves. They're responsible for more of themselves. But at the end of the day, they're still reliant heavily on their parents. It's especially true for junior and senior high kids. Yeah, they got a little more independence. Senior high kids can go get jobs. They can drive, all that kind of stuff. But basically, they're still a kid. They're not at the point where they could support themselves, another person, let alone another child. That is where we get into the tension of sexual development, is that they're not at the point where they could support another child. So this is the crisis, right? One of the things that I say is that this would be a whole lot different conversation within the church and in general if kids were getting married at 18, right? The conversation about sexuality, if kids are getting married at 18, is a whole different case than when they're getting married at 27, 29 years old, all right? Specifically when it comes to faith, though, we have a problem, and it's simply this. The problem with adolescence for Christian theology is that the world of the Bible knows nothing of the world of adolescence that we know of today, okay? Read different people, some people say, yeah, there was a period of transition for Jewish boys and girls. Fine. It definitely wasn't as long as it is now. No one was going on into secondary and high school education, college, post-secondary education, post-college. No one was doing a PhD until they were 29, back in the days of Scripture. This does not mean that the Bible isn't relevant. What it means is we have to do more work in helping to interpret Scripture appropriately when it comes to understanding this area of sexuality, specifically unmarried, okay? I think the Bible has a lot to say about this topic. I think the Bible has a whole lot to say about married sexuality, but I think it's less work, actually, to interpret properly the Bible's teaching regarding married sexuality compared to what we teach about unmarried sexuality, right? Dating wasn't really a thing. Engagement worked a whole different way in the world, specifically the New Testament, than it does today. So we're dealing with a cultural gap that's sizable, and that's what makes this a little bit more challenging. But I think there are some principles that we can derive, and I think this is where we have to start. What are the principles that we believe about sexuality? Number one, God has laid out a good, I add very good, plan for sexual expression. If you don't believe me, read Song of Songs or Song of Solomon. One of my favorite things to do, specifically in my confirmation class, is to have them read Song of Solomon. All right? They're old enough to begin to get the innuendos, and there are innuendos in the Song of Solomon. Now, Song of Solomon can be interpreted allegorically. There's a whole different way you can interpret it. But it definitely presents the case that physical expression of love between a man and a woman within the context of marriage is something that God designed and intended, okay? And is to be celebrated, is good and wonderful, all right? The problem is that if we teach kids that sex is bad, we're wiring it into them at a young age that sex is bad, sexual expression is bad, and it's not. That's not ever what the Bible teaches. Nowhere in Scripture does it teach that sexual expression in and of itself is bad. Okay? What we need to do is to teach and to help them to recognize healthy and faithful and unhealthy and unfaithful forms of sexual expression. All right? My case is simply this. Many sexual acts are in and of themselves inherently neutral. They're neutral. They're neither good nor bad in and of themselves. It is all about the context in which they occur. Let me give you an example, okay? I was talking to one of our junior high girls. She's in 8th grade a couple weeks ago, and she talked about going to the movies. And when she was at the movies, there was a kid next to her who she thought was younger than her, but who reached out and put his hand on her leg, okay? She told him to stop, move down the row. He wouldn't stop. Eventually, she ended up leaving the theater, okay? Now, the key thing is this. Putting your hand on somebody else's leg can be a very acceptable, appropriate, in fact, welcome form of affection. In this case, it was not, all right? In this case, it was unfaithful, all right? But in many cases, it is very faithful and fine, appropriate even, wonderful. But not in that case. Do you see what I mean by the context means everything? I'm not becoming a relativist here, all right? But in this case, I think context is very important. You can't say, well, sexual intercourse is always bad. No, it's not. That's ridiculous, okay? Can it be bad? Absolutely. Absolutely, it can be bad and inappropriate and unfaithful. Can it be good? Yes, it's all about the context. It's all about the framework in which that expression is occurring. And that's what I think we have to teach kids, is about faithful and unfaithful expressions. Okay? I'm going to stop there because I'm just going to set this whole thing up. And what I should do is I should go on to talk about how it is I think we can talk to our kids about that. I will next week. This week, I actually want to talk about one of the biggest problems I see. Why I think it's so important that we do talk to our kids about this. And that is simply because the number one threat to healthy sexual development today is the ever-present availability of pornography. And I want to show you 2 videos, and then I'll be back.
When we are born, we are given a world built on the decisions of previous generations. A world created by their choices, some good and some bad. Decisions are constantly made without the knowledge of how they will affect us, our society, and our world. But what if we did know the effects? What if we could make choices now that would someday lead to a better world? Every person has a choice. We choose what we buy, what we wear, what we say, and what we do. These choices contribute to an ever-growing swell that drives the course of society, eventually defining an entire generation. But it all starts with one choice from one person. 2 generations ago, society began making choices that have shaped today's understanding of pornography. In 1948, Dr. Alfred Kinsey published a best-selling book that suggested that all forms of sexual behavior should be normalized and that people should pursue all sexual urges regardless of age. Businessmen capitalized on this new idea and porn magazines hit the newsstands. Many became convinced that it was cool, harmless, and a gentleman's pursuit. Then, in 1993, came the internet. And like a tidal wave, pornography flooded the World Wide Web as a generation became consumed. And now, for the first time in history, hardcore pornography can be accessed from anywhere and at any time. So what does this mean for our generation? Through new innovations in brain technology, psychology, and sociology, we now know the truth about pornography. Porn is like a drug. It can rewire the brain, form addictions, alter views about sex, objectify the human body, fuel the demand for sex slavery, and reshape society as a whole. Pornography is often violent and abusive, a degrading lie that distorts the very meaning of healthy relationships and love. We are the first generation in the history of the world to face the issue of pornography to this intensity and scale. We are also the first generation with a science-based understanding of the harm pornography can do. And with that knowledge, we feel the responsibility to share it with others. We are determined to be the generation who pursues real love and rejects its hollow counterfeit. We will fight this new drug, and we will not rest until the world knows that pornography is harmful.
Hello.
I'm going, I'm ready.
Oh yeah, I love technology. Makes my day easy.
I use my computer and I use my phone all of the time.
I'm always texting the ladies, of course.
Depending on if I'm doing homework, I use the internet for that, or I get on Facebook, talk to friends, load pictures.
See what the 411 is, the deets.
I use it every day.
I don't know. I mean, if I didn't have technology, I couldn't listen to music as easily.
Without? I don't know. I love technology. I use it every day.
Well, obviously with technology, there's like so many things that could like come up, and like just because it's so open and so many people are on it and there's so much access. And I remember being little and like having things pop up and I have no idea what they are, just scared that they popped up. I was just like, what the crap?
Pornography is kind of that taboo word that someone says porn and you're like, oh, let's not talk about it, let's change the subject, you know?
I don't know, I feel dirty saying that word. Is that bad?
I think I just remember a pop-up came up and I was just like, oh my gosh, what do I do? What do I do? And like you try to click out and you're just like freaking out.
And then, boom, there's a pornographic picture and you're just, you know, it's not what you wanted, but it's there.
I was like 8. and just popped up and you're like, oh shoot.
Like, it's just something that you just cringe at. You're just kind of like, oh, why?
A lot of the television shows I watch, they start off with like a lot of like things hinting towards it, and then you start watching that more and more and you get used to it thinking it's okay.
You're just kind of getting immune to it, but you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be getting immune to this.
Because once you get into it, once you look at it, you get a little curious. It starts progressing after that, and it's not good.
But I think the everyday teen is not educated enough to know it's an addiction, and that's how they end up getting hooked and addicted.
They're trying so hard to get people and target people that they put it anywhere they can.
Teens' minds are still developing. Well, some are stopped. But I mean,
If they start while you're young, then they've got you for a long time. They've got you for life because it's an addiction.
At that age, you don't think it's gonna happen, you know, but it does.
All right, a few facts about porn. Number one, porn is bad. And this has been recognized by Christian and secular sources. Those 2 videos you just watched were not from a Christian organization. They weren't. They were from a secular organization. This has been now recognized across the board. There's not a whole lot of debate whether porn is a good thing, good, innocent, neutral. Pretty much everyone has decided that porn is bad. And specifically, I think for our context, it's bad because it creates unrealistic expectations for sexual encounters for teens. There was a great quote in an article I read about a mom who was talking to her son, and she said to him, look, there's things you see on your laptop screen that you shouldn't expect a girl to do on the first date, the 5th date, or probably ever. All right. Surveys right now show that 20% of American high school students have engaged in anal sex. 20%. Where are they learning that? It's not even something that's really covered a lot in sex ed. It's just, where are they learning that? Most people think it's got to be from pornography. It's got to be from pornography. It's creating unrealistic, unhealthy expectations for sexual encounters for teens, okay? It's the equivalent of watching a football game and then expecting to go throw a football like Tom Brady. Whether it's inflated all the way or not an issue. But do you see the point? Porn creates this expectation. This is what sex is. And the fact is, those are paid professional actors who are doing that on a screen, all right? That is nothing like what real sexual expression is like for most people because it's paid. It's an act. It's a show. It's like the equivalent of saying that shows like, I don't know, pick it, Game of Thrones, Grey's Anatomy, Parks and Recreation, anything like that, accurately reflect reality. Everyone knows they don't. That's the problem. Media, to make a good storyline, has to create something that's outlandish, that's beyond reality. That's what porn is when it comes to sex. But if our kids are watching porn to learn about sex, that's what they're learning. This is normal. This is what sex is when they watch porn. Bad news, all right? We also know that porn actually has a drug-like effect on the brain. Pornography damages the brain. It rewires the brain, and it does tremendous damage to marriages. A couple weeks ago, Andy Stanley was talking about the church and our role in the culture wars, and he made a comment. He said, look, if Christians would just stop watching porn, specifically men, I'll throw men under the bus here. If Christian men would stop watching porn, marriages would be better. It's true, okay? So it has drug-like effects on the brain. It can have long-term detrimental effects on relationships, all right? And specifically, porn use is common amongst adolescents. It really is. I did a talk on porn with our junior and senior high students. Specifically, I took the boys. Nobody was uncomfortable. Nobody was unfamiliar. Oh, no, I shouldn't say that. They were very uncomfortable, but nobody was unfamiliar. No one was surprised when I started talking about porn. I didn't have to define it for anybody. Everyone knew what pornography was when we talked about it. It's common. If they're not watching it themselves, they know other people are. They know what it is. Porn use is common amongst adolescents. So how do we shape this conversation about porn? What do we do about it? All right. I think what we do about it is we have to shape the conversation right. Here's the thing to understand. Your kids will often look at porn. They will. They will look at porn, often accidentally. All right. You notice in the video that I showed, most first exposure to porn isn't intentional. They didn't mean to. Something popped up at them. Okay. The thing is, curiosity, though, gets the best of all of us, doesn't it? Especially kids with inquisitive minds. So they click on it and they watch it. All right. And one thing leads to another. This holds true, by the way, for girls and guys. I should have said that. Porn is not just a guy's issue. All right. You could say, as an overgeneralization, I'm going to make this clear, it's overly generalized. All right. But that you can either watch pornography for fulfillment, for sexual gratification, or for information. All right. Some would say the guys tend to do it mainly for gratification. Girls mainly do it for information. Okay. I think that as a generalization, it's true, but I think both genders do it for both. Okay. I think a lot of guys accidentally run into porn trying to find out information. They hear a word, they click on Google, and they follow it through, and what do they end up with? Okay, that's what I mean. I think a lot of people go into porn, a lot of kids go looking for porn to find information. So oftentimes their first exposure is accidental, curiosity gets the best of them. Second thing, if and when you discover your child is looking at pornography or has looked at pornography, I think your reaction needs to be very mindful. All right, shouting, yelling, and screaming may immediately make them stop looking at it and put it away. But what it's going to do is it's going to let them know this is not a safe topic to talk to mom and dad about. This is not something that mom and dad are okay talking about. I need to find other people to talk to this about. I need to look other places to talk to mom and dad about. If I see something I'm uncomfortable with or scared by, I can't talk to mom and dad. You don't want to shut down the conversation in your home about porn. You don't. You want your kids to feel comfortable talking to you about porn. So be mindful of your reaction. Most likely your kid will be embarrassed. And you need to be mindful of that conversation and say, you know what, we need to talk about this, maybe not right now. You always need to lead with grace and forgiveness, especially if your son or daughter reacts with guilt or remorse, right? If you find your daughter looking at porn or you're checking at web history or whatever and it comes up, one of the first questions that I think you should ask is, what were you looking for? What started you down this path? It could be something, well, I was at school today and I heard this word and I wanted to know what it was because everyone else seemed to know what it was and I didn't, right? And in some ways you can't blame her, right? She doesn't want to feel left out, so she's going to go looking for information somewhere and, well, she stumbles into porn. We need to do everything we can not to instill guilt and shame, because that, again, shuts the conversation down. It communicates to them, look, this is not a safe topic to talk to mom and dad about. Okay? We need to convince kids, and this is the big difference between pornography and sexuality in general, right? Sexuality in general is a good thing. And in the right context, in the right situation, sexuality is wonderful and should be celebrated, practiced, and encouraged. I, for one, will go on the record in saying, I am looking forward to being a granddad someday, okay? 20 years would be good, but someday I would like to be a grandfather. That means that I hope my two kids someday are fully sexually active adults, all right? So there's a good end there. That's not the case with porn. Porn isn't something that you age into, right? There's a lot of things in our culture you age into. You age into driving, you age into being able to drink, all right? You don't age into porn. Porn doesn't become good at some point in life. It's fundamentally different than just sex in general, all right? But we can do this. We've done this with cigarettes, okay? This can be done. Cigarettes, when I was in middle school, high school, cigarettes was what all the rebellious cool kids smoked. Now, nobody smokes cigarettes. Okay, some people do, all right? Some teens do. But it's not nearly the thing. Smoking's not nearly the cool thing now. They've moved on. It could be weed, all right, all that kind of stuff. What I'm saying is we have successfully communicated to our kids that cigarettes are bad, all right? We need to do that with porn. Okay, so how do we frame this conversation then about porn? All right, one of the series that I used this year used this analogy. It said porn is a ripoff, and it drew on Proverbs. Now the top section right here is actually the words of Proverbs, and it's basically a warning to stay away from adulterous women, stay away from prostitutes. Okay, this verse I think translates well because porn isn't a literal physical interaction between a man and a woman in this case, but it is a sexual interaction, so I think it applies well. And I paraphrased it this way: my son, pay attention to what I'm going to tell you. It comes from years of gaining wisdom. My hope is that you make good choices and say good and right things. Pornography seems to offer everything you want, a woman who can't refuse you, and all the sexual gratification you could ever want. But in the end, porn won't deliver either of those things. All you'll end up with is being ripped off with bitterness, right? Porn offers a lot. It seems to offer a lot. These were kind of the 4 points, right? Again, this was oriented toward guys, but we go to porn because we're distracted, all right? And then we're not. We go to porn seeking a beautiful woman, and in return, we see a beautiful woman. We go to porn needing to feel good, and we do. We go to porn because we want to experience something new and exciting. There's always something new and exciting when it comes to porn. But we go to porn wanting to feel strong, but actually robs us of our strength. It doesn't actually give, in this case, a guy what they're looking for from pornography. For a girl, it doesn't actually give them the healthy, appropriate information that they need. Okay? That's not, if they want to find out what something is, porn's not the way to find out about it. We'll talk about a little bit more about ways that we can help our kids find good sources. But, it doesn't actually give us what we want. Porn can make you feel wanted. That's why we go to porn. But when you're done, you realize you're still alone. You want to go feeling accepted. You end up isolated. You're still alone. And finally, we want to feel successful, but in the end, you feel like a failure. All right. So porn makes great promises about what it can be. Porn offers a lot in theory, but no matter what, pornography is always a ripoff. And that was kind of what I shared with both the junior high and senior high guys. Look, porn will not deliver on what you're actually seeking. What you're actually seeking is genuine human interaction. That's not what pornography is going to offer you. Okay. The reason that I think that framework is helpful is, number one, is that it's something that they can acknowledge, right? Porn's a ripoff. And if nothing else, if you're going to look at porn, admit to yourself you're being ripped off. I think this is helpful because a lot of people, once they think about it in that framework, go, oh, this is not good for me. This doesn't work to my advantage. I'm not benefiting from this. This is what we need to convince our kids, right? That pornography is not benefiting them. It's not good for them. Okay. So what are some concrete strategies that parents can take? Number one is this. To understand this principle, John Acuff said this at a conference I was at a couple weeks ago. There's not a third grader on the planet who's ready for the internet and everyone who comes with it. Okay. You know that adage, it's not you I worry about, it's the other guy? My mother said it all the time when it came to driving, right? Brian, I trust you, it's the other guy. It's the same principle with the internet. I trust my kids. I don't trust all the other crazy people who now have access to my kids through the internet. All right. So we need to be careful how we allow access to the internet. Number one, start young. I know this has been a theme throughout the whole class. Start young and emphasize that kids will see it. It is okay to come and tell you. We had our first conversation about internet pornography at the dinner table Saturday night. I don't even know how it came up, but we were talking about something about the internet, and I simply said, guys, you're going to see things on the internet that you're not supposed to see, that are going to scare you. And when you do, you can tell us, right? My kids are 6 and 7 right now. They don't think it's awkward. They don't even know what I'm talking about. What I did say is I said, specifically to Andrew, I said, Andrew, this is why we like you to watch YouTube videos. He watches Stampy Cat, who records Minecraft videos but doesn't swear. So they're family friendly, right? Like he can watch them and not learn a whole new vocabulary. So we allow that. But the thing is, on YouTube, there's suggested videos that pop up after the video they meant to watch. And those videos sometimes are porn promos. They're not real porn. YouTube doesn't permit real porn, but they can be previews. They can have links in them. Hey, go check out this website for more. That can happen. This is why we like Andrew to watch his YouTube videos with the volume on, no headphones, where we can hear what he's hearing. Okay. Only once have I had to intervene in a video. He was listening to something, he clicked on something else. I knew right away this was not the type of content I wanted my 7-year-old to be exposed to. Okay. But I wanted my kids to know, if you see something on the internet that scares you, it's okay to come tell me. All right. It's okay to come tell us. Private internet access, cannot underscore this enough, is a bad thing. Really, really bad thing. Bad thing. When I was first in youth ministry, early 2000s, the way we taught parents to avoid porn exposure was say, look, keep the family computer in a public place. Okay? That'll minimize it. It's a good preventive cause. I still suggest that, but if you do that, you've got to watch out for now the phone and the tablet and the game system, right? So many internet-connected devices are in our homes now. It's a whole different world. Limiting the computer doesn't necessarily help. The interesting thing to keep in mind, okay, is that game systems are one of the #1 sources for viewing porn. Just for kicks, I went on YouTube and I Googled Xbox 360 porn. There's a ton of videos on YouTube that explain to people how to set up your Xbox 360 in order to view porn. Okay, it's out there. It's big. Okay, it's very common actually. Xbox 360 is one of the largest porn platforms out on the internet. So tablets, same thing, right? Tablets, phones, all of them can be used to access porn in one way or another. All right. So, but private internet access, bad thing, especially in bedrooms. Okay, not a good idea. But as kids age, they get to the point where they need to do their homework, and they don't do their homework in the middle of everybody, and they need the internet to do the homework. So what else can you do? Number one, there's a service called OpenDNS. OpenDNS, you configure your router to connect to OpenDNS, and I'll post the handouts for it. It's not super hard to configure your router. If you need help, call me, all right? OpenDNS is free. We use it actually here at the church. So if you're here at church and you're on our public Wi-Fi and you search for something, you go to a page, OpenDNS will block it. It's a great service. I love it. It's free. It automatically updates. You don't have to do anything. You set your router once and you're done. This covers your tablets, covers your iPads, it covers your game systems, it covers your computer, covers your phone. As long as it's connected to Wi-Fi, kids can always go around on the phone. They can simply disconnect from the home Wi-Fi and go straight through the cellular signal. And we'll talk about how to deal with that later. But OpenDNS is free. It might actually speed up your internet access compared to what you're getting now, so do it. Trust me, do it. And again, on the handout that I handed out that I'll post in the comments, you'll be able to find the handout. Second thing is look into internet accountability software. NetNanny, Covenant Eyes, and X3 Watch are 3 examples. There's others out there, I'm sure. These are things that store web histories, that monitor what your kid is talking about. It monitors chat conversations, it monitors text. It can monitor a lot, and it gives you reports. So this way, if your kid is looking at porn on their phone with a cellular connection instead of through your home Wi-Fi, you can find out. All right, let me explain. All these have loopholes. All right, even this. If you have NetNanny appropriately installed on all your devices and it's all working well, I guarantee your kid has a friend who doesn't have NetNanny. You can't prevent them hard and fast from looking at porn. Okay, you just can't. There's always going to be ways around it. They're smart. The OpenDNS, I think, is a great idea because it's so easy, it's so safe, and it will help prevent a lot of the accidental exposure. Okay, but if your kids are intent on looking at pornography, they're going to find a way around anything you do. All right, so I haven't figured out, like OpenDNS, we definitely use at home. All right, but the internet accountability software, I'm not sure what we're going to do. Our kids aren't quite at the age where we need to deal with that yet. We're getting close. But I'm not sure what I'm going to do because I like the principle. I really do. I like the principle. But knowing that kids are always going to get around it doesn't mean it's a bad idea, especially if you have kids who are younger. I think it's very, I think then it can be very helpful because you can find out accidental exposure. They're not going to be quite as intentional about trying to seek out porn. But older kids, junior high, senior high especially, if they want to look at porn, they're going to find a way to look at porn. Trust me. All right? So that being said, I need to add this on, and this is the clarifier I need to add on. So if you're actually at the class on Sunday, I need to clarify this. I said, last but not least, there is no right to privacy for adolescents and teens. We care about what they eat, what they do with their bodies, the classes they take. We have a right to care about what they're ingesting via the internet. And I should say this. I stand by that, all right? Specifically when it comes to technology. I'm not going to speak medically, okay? I know in the medical field there's questions about privacy and at what point adolescents don't have their parents in the room for doctor's visits. I'm not talking about that at all. I know nothing about that. Sarah Gilmore is far more qualified to comment on that than I am, so I am not talking about medical. I'm talking specifically as it relates to technology. There is no right to privacy for kids, okay? But we want to offer our kids privacy. You do not want to be snooping around on your kid's phone, and that's what I would say. Don't snoop. Don't snoop. If you're going to check your kid's phone, you need to tell them that you're going to be checking their phone. That's a deterrent, all right? The goal, by the way, is not to catch your kids watching porn. It's to deter them from investigating porn in the first place. The way to do that is to say, look, this is your phone. This is an incredibly powerful tool used well. It is an incredibly powerful tool misused too. Use it wisely. I, as the one who bought this phone and am paying for it, reserve the right to check your phone if I want to. I don't want to have to do that, but I reserve that right. You need to know that. So, again, I would say, they don't have a right to privacy, no. Okay, it's your phone. You bought it. You pay for it. All right. But be really careful about this. You want to trust your kids. Your kids want to be trusted. This is where parents and teens have to work together to figure this one out together. Because if you're in the position where you're feeling like you have to snoop on your kids, where you have to go check their phone all the time, and you're grabbing their phone at night after they've gone to bed and leafing through it and reading their text messages, you don't want to have to do that because that's not going to deter anything. All right, it's going to create a situation where you're trying to catch your kids. All right, don't do that. So no, kids don't have a right to privacy when it comes to tech, but I think you want to instill it in them that you're going to trust them as much as you can and set up good common sense guidelines. Last thing I want to talk about porn is it relates to sexting. Sexting is this phenomenon where girls and guys send sexually suggestive or downright pornographic images back and forth to one another. It's a big issue, all right? And we've tended to approach sexting by saying to girls, don't do it. Don't send these images, all right? That's good. That's good. We need to keep teaching parents that. But I think sexting is as much an issue for guys, too. Because I think guys need to be taught, don't ask. Don't ask a girl for a sexually inappropriate image. Dating, not dating, at the age you're at, don't ask. The reason I say that is that I think in talking with specifically junior high and senior high girls who have made mistakes in this area of sexting and also sexual expression in general, what I oftentimes hear is, I did it because I thought it would help our relationship. I thought he'd love me more. I thought he wouldn't leave me, right? And as parents, we tend to go, oh, come on, we know better than that. But you know what? If you think back when you were 16 and 17, I'm really glad that we didn't have cell phones when I was that age. I imagine a lot of you are too. We need to teach our sons and the boys, look, don't ask. Don't ask. It's not appropriate. It's not okay to be asking for sexually inappropriate images from girls. So that's a wrap for this week. That's what we kind of talked about. The general outline of what sexual expression and faith as it relates to specifically porn. Next week we're going to talk about a whole host of things. We're going to talk about dating. We're going to talk about helping your kids talk about boundaries. We're going to talk about all kinds of more meat and potatoes, practical guides for parents to navigate those teenage years. These I should say now. I've never parented a teenager. I don't know, but I've been around teenagers a long time, and I've watched a lot of parents, and I've learned a lot from a lot of parents. So next week I'm going to be trying to share what I've learned from watching other parents who I think have navigated these teen years and the dating well. So that'll be next week. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Hopefully I'll see you Sunday, and if not, we will have the recording up of session 4. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.